Believe it or not, our original idea for what became inFamous was, the way we described it was, it's Animal Crossing, but you're a superhero. And it's super different than what we ended up shipping as the game.
With
right?
like all of these social interactions that Animal
absolutely.
Crossing?
So yeah, a lot of kind of simulation stuff, a lot of interacting with the city and really owning it as a superhero. And you know, as we were working, as we kept iterating, it became clear that what the game really wanted to be was something different than we thought it wanted to be, right? So what we wanted it to be. You kind of have to let it grow, right?
So you talked about the game as if it sort of has
Absolutely.
its own
You have to
mind.
think of it that way. You have to listen to what the game's telling you. You have to actually try it, but don't force it into what you think it's going to be, right?
From a mild-mannered Animal Crossing imitator to a superpowered superhero simulator, inFamous and the games that followed have become mainstays on the PlayStation console, as well as one of the most celebrated series in gaming. Now, on the eve of inFamous Second Son's release, we take a look back at the origin story of these electrifying action games alongside the people who helped create them, here at Sucker Punch Productions. When Sucker Punch started work on inFamous, it wasn't with the intent of making a superhero game or an open-world game or even an action-adventure game. No, inFamous began as something much more nebulous.
I think it's really true of really all the games we made is we really cherish that in the feel of in your hands, how that game feels. It's so important that we give you that sense of that the controller kind of disappears. There's a million details and a lot of work that goes into trying to make that happen.
I think the thing we spent the most time working on was the parkour system, because we were trying to do something that there wasn't something we could copy.
Yeah.
One of the original kind of character points for Cole was that he was into urban exploration. You know, those guys who find old power plants or the abandoned sewers or hospitals. So we said, hey, look, this is kind of an interesting thing to do. We should design a system where the player could parkour all over the environment. What would that be like?
In games, typically, you think of the environment as the backdrop, something pretty to look at while you're playing the game. But in our games, that's not what it is. It's part of the game. It's part of the gameplay. You get up close and personal with all this stuff. And the process of getting that working right in inFamous took a long time.
And I think we must have written and discarded 5 systems for climbing buildings. Chris always describes his job when he's doing that as reading the player's mind through his thumbs.
And getting that right, it's a hard problem. And so it took a long time for us to get to the point where we thought we were above the bar. We don't always get it right even now.
We wanted to make an open world game for inFamous because the nature of the moves of being a superhero are so big. Don't want to feel like, oh yeah, I'm this demigod, but I have to stay in this tube. If you're going to make a game where you have these fantastic superpowers, you need to give people this sandbox environment to use them in.
Everything was driven as, how do we take what we love about the sort of genre, but imagine it as starting in a video game. And so the idea of, if you got powers, what would you do? Who would be the first person I would tell, and how would I feel about it? Would I go see a doctor? And then, you know, the more longer term questions of, would it corrupt me? I think that's where the ideas of having karma and taking an ordinary guy, giving him powers, and seeing what happens to him, that was really the genesis of that idea.
I imagine it would have been easy to just, let's give him strength and speed, and he can be telekinetic and like do all these different things. Like, how did you?
That's exactly what
I'm sure you
happened.
did. Like, how did you manage to stay like focused down on one, or decide on one particular skill set?
When we got to electricity, we started talking about it, and one of the things that we realized was that it was kind of the blood of a city, in that when electricity goes away, the city really struggles, and when it returns, it kind of brings life to the city. And so it was interesting for him to kind of draw that energy out of the city, and when you went into parts of town that were powered down, we thought that was actually quite interesting, and that you would be weak there, and it was kind of a natural weakness.
The thing that worked for people is when we said, you get to decide whether you're a good guy or a bad guy. And everyone that we'd say that in the middle of telling them like 10 things. And they'd be like, no, wait, stop there, right? That was what I want. You know, that's what I want from the game. I want to know whether I'm a good guy or a bad guy.
You kind of ask yourself that question, if I had powers, like if you could turn invisible, you know, would you use them to be a nice guy, or would you sneak into the girls' locker room, right? Video games are awesome for that because it's a space where you can experiment and not worry about the consequences, because it's not real. but it kind of feels real in the moment when you're playing.
When the original Infamous hit store shelves back in 2009, it was welcomed with open arms from both critics and consumers alike. In his review, GameSpot's own Tom McShea awarded the game a prestigious score of 9, praising its ease of movement and well-paced design. Ultimately, Infamous did well enough to warrant a sequel, but as Sucker Punch started planning out Infamous 2, they discovered everyone had an idea for how to improve upon their superhero formula.
We wanted to take what we'd done in Infamous 1, keep the good stuff, and add in, better production values, so we started doing mocap for the first time. We thought we could up the ante on the gameplay. We thought we could make it more epic, more spectacular. We wanted to personify the Karma, so we brought Quo and Nix in, the two side characters, one of whom kind of embodies the ruthless approach, and one of them is more of a kind of a goody two-shoes.
We also tried to make a lot better melee for the character, because we found after Infamous 1, everybody wanted to knock enemies in the face.
Is that what you gave him the amp weapon?
Yeah, man. Somehow that was integral to the superhero fantasy. And it's the thing with video games, you need to provide range so that you can affect people at a distance. That's like a common problem. We thought, okay, great, this guy's got electricity, let's give him a weapon that is pretty much a big metal pipe that he can turn into the world's largest taser, right?
Armed with the largest taser in gaming, Infamous 2 was released to the public in 2011, where it received a positive, if not a bit more mixed, reaction from consumers. Tom McShea reprised his role as our Infamous reviewer, and gave this game a 7.5, praising the game's new setting and fluid movement, but taking issue with its uneven pacing, among other things. For the next Infamous game, Sucker Punch knew they needed to push this series further than they had before. A new PlayStation console was in the works, and on the back of this new technology, Sucker Punch started designing a new world, a new protagonist, and a whole bunch of new powers for Infamous Second Son. However, the one thing they wanted to improve upon above all others was Infamous's karma system, the term Sucker Punch uses to describe these branching, good or evil morality choices.
Looking ahead from Infamous 2, we kind of look back on the data we collected on how people were playing Infamous 1 and Infamous 2. The data was really clear that what people do is they decide before they even buy the game, I'm going to play good, or I'm going to play evil. Once you decided whether you're going to be good or evil, we didn't give you any interesting choices. And so what we've done instead was we've said, okay, you're going to be a hero, you're going to be the good guy, but how good a hero can you be? How careful are you going to be in combat to avoid casualties? We found that that is a much better kind of gameplay loop. You have to play that out in the context of combat, which is a lot harder, right? And so you could play through the game and make all the story decisions correctly, but if you're bad at the combat and you're not keeping your gameplay aligned with that, then you're not going to get all the way to the kind of higher levels of good karma. And the same thing goes for evil.
How has the PlayStation 4 hardware sort of changed the way that you approach what it is that you do?
And of course, a lot of it, of course, was the upgrade in the hardware that gave us, the ability to actually push this, big jump in cutscene quality and in this facial animation. And from that point of just the number of points that define the surface of your character, you can get that many more details that when you're animating, you see folds in the face or in the subtleties that come through.
At the start of the first Infamous, Sucker Punch employed around 40 to 60 people. And now, 3 games later, that number has roughly doubled. But while Sucker Punch continues to grow, it still tries to maintain that tight-knit mentality of its formative years.
And we found that as we've grown over the course of Infamous, as we've gone from 50 people to 130 people, that becomes a little bit harder. Because none of us could actually build something as cool as the Infamous games, much less Second Son, on our own, right? We all rely on each other to make it great. I mean, I've been immersed in the Infamous series for 6 years now, right? So I know intimately exactly what's changed and what's the same as we go from game to game. But for most people who play the game, they get a new Infamous game, they love it, then it's another 2 years before they get to play another one. If we do our job right, people remember the positive emotions they had about the Infamous games. We meet their new expectations because they want it to be better, and they think nothing's changed. That's kind of the mark of success for us, is people say, well, they didn't change anything about the climbing system. We did. But we just made it better in ways that you didn't notice, or that just were better, you know, that you just were like, oh, that's what it's supposed to feel like. That's what I thought it felt like last time, but it's mostly because you've forgotten the ways in which it didn't meet your expectations.